So a very warm welcome to everyone. I'm not going to do the opening prayers because we just heard Sri Swami Venkatesananda Maharaj doing the opening prayers for us. And again, we're very happy that we have so many of you joining us this afternoon here in Cape Town. And initially when we started this, or we had the idea of these monthly satsangs, we were thinking more of those people who had not met Swami Venkatesananda and how they would benefit from listening to the various devotees and disciples of Swami Venkatesananda. But to our great delight, we see that it is also becoming a sort of gathering of the disciples themselves coming together. And we witness the great joy that they all having of meeting each other online. So that is also really wonderful for us to be part of. So tonight is the second edition of our monthly satsangs. And I'm very happy to welcome Dr. Veena Sharma Mataji from Rishikesh. Mataji is like a spiritual mother to me. Every time I go to India, which is almost annually, I make a point of spending time with Mataji. And when she was living in Delhi, now she's in Rishikesh. So we spent much time together, and also we've done a little bit of study together, some of the Upanishads, which means really I've been learning from her as well. So I'm very happy that so happy that Mataji has agreed to share tonight or this afternoon, or it's evening in India now. So I'm not going to give much more of an introduction because that was done in the email that went to you all. And so welcome, Veena Mataji, and we look forward to your sharing. So Mataji will do some sharing, and then time permitting, we may have time for questions or some interaction. Let us see. So yes, welcome Mataji, welcome everybody, and I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Swamiji. Ajnana-timirandasya jnananjana-shalakaya chakshurunmilitam yena tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Thank you, Swamiji. It is amazing that we are connecting across these spatial boundaries, thanks to COVID. And I wish we could also connect across temporal boundaries, and we could have made our offerings to Swamiji in person in that case. But it's wonderful that we can connect across spatial boundaries. So many of us, there's Lakshmi Ananda in Australia, Mother Yogeshwari in Cape Town, Priya in Jerusalem, Sushila Ananda in America, Ambika Ananda, whom I just saw so beautifully in the UK. And then there are people like Narayan and Sadashiva, and of course yourself, Swamiji, doing such a lot of wonderful work. It is amazing that you've managed this, and it's such a good idea to do this. Whatever we can put together and whatever we can share. Thank you. Actually, speaking about Swami Venkatesananda, I think it's like measuring an ocean with a teacup. The expanse is so large and we are so small. But I think that's the beauty of it. Depending on the size and shape and form and the imprint of on the teacup and also the opacity or the translucence of the cup, we get, according to also our context, whatever we were able to get. And that is why this idea of yours of having so many different people speaking about Swamiji, remembering him, remembering their time with him from their different contexts is so wonderful, because we get insights which we may not have had before. So in my case, I met Swamiji in Mauritius in the year 1971. And the occasion actually was a bronze installation of a bronze bust of Swami Shivananda. And I'm sure the month was September. And this was the first function we attended when we reached Mauritius. And all the creme de la creme of Mauritius was there in all their plumes and fineries and everything. And there was this one person there, radiant in his ochre robes, so bright and so beautiful, so intelligent. And when he spoke, it was so much love and wit and humor that he was actually a very attractive personality. And it was amazing that in the midst of all those people, he stood out so amazingly. Actually, I've got, and actually I've even got some pointers from G, because being a teacup, we have to, in order to try and give a semblance of order, I've made some points to try and see that I don't totally go off. But anyway, when I saw Swamiji, I had never seen a person of such beautiful aura who just drew you in. And but I will read what Swami wrote about Swami Shivananda in his book Gurudev. And he said that the divine spark, when it enters a mortal coil, shines with such splendor that it is seldom possible for the human frame not to reflect it, to however limited an extent it might be. God-men have always possessed godly bodies, endowed with charm, sweetness, and perfect health and build. One thing, however, ought to be remembered. A charming physical appearance is not just skin deep. It has its roots in the inner soul and is represented by an irresistible attraction which the person has for all those who approach him. He wrote this about Swami Shivananda, but I think it applies totally to him because he had this aura and he just drew people into his aura without any effort at all. And I think this may be because people of this nature, whom sometimes they're called godmen, but they're special people, they straddle two planes of existence. I think one is the plane in which they are constantly in their Brahman Swarup, in their true nature. And the other is the normal transactional mind-body frame, the same as ours, with the same tools, but the tools, the way they use them, they are refined and honed to perfection. So they can use them in a way that is quite different to the way that we use. And that is why when Swamiji used them, when he looked at anybody, it was as though he looked right through. He just sort of scanned through the dross and reached the soul, and that is where the connection was made. I think that is the special thing about these great people. And the thing with Swamiji was that he was, because of this reason, because of his straddling these two planes, and because of his always being in his Brahman Swarup, he was the same everywhere, whether it was a formal banquet or whether it was a poor man's hut. Swamiji was always the same. I remember Rani Kumudini Devi of Hyderabad, who was also a great friend of Swamiji's. She was telling me once that long ago, when he was going to her house for the first time, very, very many years ago, she had these teenage boys who were non-believers, who were renegade, who would question. So she told them to behave themselves when the Swami comes to the house. And she said that when he came, the boys were all around him. They had so many nice conversations and they were rolling in laughter, and there was absolutely no problem whatsoever. So all her anxieties and everything were completely dissolved when Swamiji was there with the boys. So I think it was the aura of his presence which was so strong that it just sort of drew us in, almost, so to say, by the scruff of our necks, we were taken in. And same was the case with me in Mauritius. And when Swamiji said something, we could not say no to it. And he would sometimes ask me to come and speak at the ashram, and I knew nothing. And yet I would not be able to say no. So when one went and said anything, he would be sitting there nodding with approval, as though some great pearls of wisdom were coming out of the mouth of this person. So that was Swamiji, always encouraging, always pulling you along, pushing you to the boundaries, but enabling you. And another thing about Swamiji was that he never preached. He never preached. He just taught by stories, analogies, passing statements. And he would do it so elegantly and in certain ways that you never felt that you were being taught, but you learned very deeply. For example, if someone came, which very often people do, they would, with complaints of so many problems in life, so many griefs, etc. So in his typical manner, he would say, if someone went to Rama with his problems, Rama would say, do you know how much I suffered? And there the whole problem would be put in perspective then. So, or he would bring out the deepest of truths through stories. One of his favorite was the Janaka and Ashtavakra story. I think all of us know it, but we can just remember it briefly, where Janaka, the philosopher king, the great emperor, he has a dream, and he finds that his empire has been attacked and ransacked and taken over, and Janaka is completely deprived of all his royal accoutrements and everything. So even within his own kingdom, nobody wants to recognize him out of fear. He's exiled. And after many days of wandering around, tattered clothes, everything, hungry, very hungry and thirsty, he finds just nothing anywhere to eat. Ultimately, he finds some food being distributed somewhere, and by the time he reaches, everything is more or less finished. So he just begs for something, and in some kind of a leaf that he manages to pick up, he gets some leftover scraps. And as he's about to partake of them, some eagle or something comes and it's gone out of his hand, and it's all just a ruin. And then when he gets up, Janaka being Janaka, the philosopher king, he just keeps on wondering to himself and saying, was this the truth or was that the truth? Am I a beggar and a pauper, or am I a king? What am I? And all his work suffered in the kingdom was not being administered, so everyone was worried. And then comes Ashtavakra, his guru, and he realizes Janaka's problem, and he says to him, come on, wake up. Neither this nor that, but the witness, the one who witnessed the two situations is you. So, and these things, these kind of stories, he would relate just in passing, not in lectures, not in any, just by the way, they would come up in the conversation, and we would be exposed to so many such kind of truths. And also then he always told us to exercise vigilance, to see, to act, and not to react. So for example, I have said this before also, you must have heard, that in Delhi when we would drive around in those crossroads, often there are either beggars or people pushing things at you, wanting you to buy, and sometimes you get irritated, you know that you don't want to give, but still you give out of just being irritated. And then he will watch it and observe it, and a little later he might say that asking for it is his prerogative, and to give or not to give is yours. but when you do it with love. So this was his gentle, elegant, beautiful, loving way of leading us along, of guiding us. And even like if I went to him with my own personal grievance or something like that, so which is the case with, I'm sure, all of us, many of us. So sometimes I used to note these things down. And once he said to me that, well, it might break your image of me as a sadhu when I make the diabolical suggestion that when someone is evil or brutal towards you, it is not you that should suffer due to his deeds. Do not allow him that pleasure, that privilege. You must just sit back and learn to watch while remaining unaffected yourself. Just look upon it as the nature of life. Let the other suffer for his misdeeds. Of course, he didn't want anyone to suffer. And immediately after saying this, he would, as though, turn a mirror to me, so as to, denude my own presumptions and opinions that I had constructed about myself, and also enabling me to see my own role in creating the situation that had been created. So in a way, he kind of demanded or asked us to offer as oblations our own presumptions and opinions into the yajna, that is life. And that was Swamiji. And he always believed that it was the perceptible world that must be tackled first before one could think in terms of another world. And he said, if you run from the here and now, how can you hope to face situations that are unknown to you? So you must, as he himself did, whichever situation he was in, he bore the world lightly. He just moved through, he just sailed through every situation. And once I remember in Delhi, at our home in Delhi, he just made a statement, too many things. Just a simple exhortation to declutter. But this 3-word sentence was like a maha mantra, and I'm still in the process of decluttering. As for Swamiji himself, his possessions, his main possessions were a typewriter and an absolutely clear mind. And the wisdom that came through that transparent mind, it got transcribed through the typewriter. And that is what has been left behind as so many of his works. And many a time he would just tell us to edit some of the work. There was no editing to be done. It was just his way of wanting us to read some article that he had written, to read it carefully, to learn from it. But he was asking us to edit. And another thing about Swamiji was that he looked upon the world as Leela. He's of course done a lot of work on Yoga Vasishta, as we know. So he looked upon it as a play, and he played his role in it. He just played. He went along, fooling around, not taking it too seriously, and yet never flippant. So he also used to tell us to develop a little cynicism. He said, question everything, and don't take everything so seriously. Just take it lightly. And he himself had his own way of highlighting the ludicrousness that he saw around. For example, if at some public function, some dignitaries would be walking around pompously, very ostentatiously, from somewhere around, Swamiji would appear and do a whole Dandavat Pranam in the middle of everyone's view, his full prostration. And such an act could only come spontaneously through a person who was totally unburdened by the load of ego. As for the other person who was the recipient of this act, I wonder what it did to them. Either it would have totally deflated them, like the puncturing of a balloon, or it could have inflated them further seeing that such a big Swami is doing the whole Dandavat Pranam to them. So I think it depended, but other people, the onlookers, would definitely enjoy the scene. So another thing that Swamiji did was that he enabled us to do things without making us feel that he was enabling us to do it. For example, we left Mauritius in 1974 and we went to Dar es Salaam to Tanzania. And at that time, when we went there, some people said to me, can you teach yoga? Because at that time there was nobody there who could teach yoga. So there were a number of expatriates and other people. And I, of course, apart from being a trained yoga teacher, I had never taught yoga. So I wrote to Swamiji and immediately came a response through the typewriter. And he said, very simple, do just what you do. And of course, having said that, I was inundated with literature. Every week I would get a parcel of books and pamphlets and diagrams and photos and all kinds of things from different centers that Swamiji had set up. I think many of them must have come from Mauritius. Some may have come from Cape Town. I don't know. At that time, I didn't know too many people. So then my classes went off very beautifully. They increased in number and we went on having them for, I think, 2 or 3 years continuously. And it worked all right, even if the teacher was me, an untrained person, untrained teacher. So it was then around the year 1979 that Swamiji started coming to India quite often. And we were also back in India at that time. And I met him in the home of Batra Mataji. I think many of us would remember her. Many stayed at her home. This stentorian, venerable old lady who was a great friend of Swamiji's and also a great guide to me as well. And when I went to meet Swamiji, he said, come to the ashram. I had never been to Rishikesh. I didn't know how one went to Rishikesh. But of course, when Swamiji said something, you never not do it. You just did it. So I took a bus at 4 o'clock in the morning and it took me directly to the Rishikesh bus stop. And there were these tongas, those horse-drawn carriages, which is how we traveled in those days from the bus stop to the ashram. And I took one of those and reached the ashram. And as I was on the road outside the reception, there was a young lady standing there. And she said, well, I'm Dorothy, and Swamiji asked me to bring you up when you come. And till today, I have not divined how they knew when I would reach the ashram. I really don't know, because we didn't have phones. And I also didn't know what transport I would be taking and getting to the ashram. But that's what happened. And so when reaching the ashram, I saw that Swamiji, the Guru, was really a disciple. So many of his so-called friends, whom he called friends, were all busy with typewriters, working on Gurudev's works. Busily, he kept them all very busy doing various things. And and as he said himself, that Gurudev's lotus feet were forever enshrined in his heart. So he was never, and he also used to say that you should always be a disciple, and if ever you begin to think you're a guru, then you're done for. It's absolutely, you should never think you're a guru. And I remember once that it was a youngster, I think from South Africa, who complained to Swamiji that there were no gurus in South Africa. So Swamiji said something to him which I always remember all the time. And he said, it's not difficult to find a guru, but it's extremely difficult to find a disciple. And he said, when the spirit of discipleship arises in us, only then shall we benefit it, even in the very least, by the presence of a Mahapurusha. And I think Swamiji exemplified that discipleship. And in fact, I will again read from the same book, from the foreword that Swami Chidanandaji wrote for Swami Venkatesananda. And he said that Swami Venkatesananda ji is to his spirit is to Swami Shivananda and to his spiritual mission, even as the great Swami Vivekananda was to his spiritual guru, Sri Ramakrishna Paramhamsa Deva. He has brought the sublime message of Gurudev Shivananda to countless earnest, spiritually inclined people throughout the length and breadth of the world. So I think this really sort of exemplifies Swamiji's spirit. He never ever forgot. In fact, he always was a disciple, and he also was always very respectful to his Guru Bhais. I remember that in the ashram, when Swami Krishnananda ji would hold his kind of sessions outside his room, and we would be sitting around there, Swamiji would sit among us with a pen and paper in his hand. He would take some notes, and then he would put them out in the newsletter. So he was totally without any ego, with respect to all. And I think in his Guru Bhais, he must have seen a little bit of Gurudev himself. People like him, people like these are rare beings. And I think we can say that we are very fortunate that we got to tread the same ground that he trod on. That is it. And I'm sure other people may have.
Thank you, Mataji. Oh. Well, thank you, Mataji, for that lovely sharing. And I would like to, I personally don't have a question that has come to mind.
Oh, lovely.
You and I have spent so much time together, and I know many of the things that you've shared with me already, but maybe others would like to share something or ask something, or maybe, some of the fellow disciples may want to also say something or meet Mataji. So I'm opening up the session to everyone. And then please do unmute yourself. And if you don't have your camera on, please put your camera on. Maybe there's something you want to know also about, being a disciple or so.
Hari Om, Mataji.
Hari Om.
And thank you so much for sharing with us, especially those of us, obviously, that never met Swami Venkatesananda. This is a great blessing to all of us. Mother, I was wondering, in all the images I see of Swami Venkatesananda ji, he's always so jovial and so happy. But have you ever seen him upset?
No. He was always even-tempered, mostly. But that doesn't mean that he couldn't be stern. As I said, that he could turn the mirror around and make us see ourselves also. But he could somehow always keep a jovial attitude. He would always enable people, whenever we were in his presence, there was always a lot of laughter. But the laughter was never flippant. There was always a lot of, it came from a very deep a heart that had empathy, and which was a very loving heart. And the laughter was just laughter at being. It was not laughter at anybody or about anybody. It was just a beingness. And it just was so infectious. You may have seen the photographs of Swami Venkatesananda and Swami Shivananda when they had the laughing competition. And I'm not sure who won. Maybe both of them did. It wasn't a competition, it was just laughter. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Priya Mataji. Maybe you have another question also, or someone else has something to ask?
There's so many wonderful faces we see whom we haven't seen for so long. There's Swami Divya Bhava, and I just saw Ambika. Such lovely, it is a lovely get-together. Swamiji, you've done a wonderful job. It was a great idea of doing this every month. And then we'll be able to hear so many other reminiscences of people who were so close to Swamiji.
Yes, yes, thank you. I mean, that is the whole idea. As you mentioned earlier on, also, I'm sure everybody had sort of their own experiences, unique experiences, and also their understanding of Swamiji.
Exactly.
And that's also important for us, I feel, to learn about, because if we can hear of all the different facets, if one thinks of Swamiji as a diamond, and each one experiences a certain facet or sees a certain facet, we get the privilege of hearing of all the facets. So that gives us also more of an idea, about Swamiji.
Because he sort of worked from the inside. He really, as I said, he never preached or taught as such. He didn't teach as such. But he entered our hearts and worked from within as though. So he brought about whatever little transformations we were capable of from within, and imperceptibly, and without any kind of a load that we carried. He carried life very lightly. He taught us, he exhorted us to do the same, to whatever extent we could. And I suppose many of us who think life is sort of difficult or whatever, we learn when we think of him and we learn, then we can remember that after all, it's not so serious and it will pass, and that we can make some joke about it, and we can see the ludicrousness of it as he used to see in different situations. And he would just go into peals of laughter in those situations. And it was very infectious.
Yes, talking about infectious, would you say that, it's always difficult to say how anyone would be at any time, and I would imagine even more difficult so about someone like Swami Venkatesananda, but in terms of world events and world crises and so on, did Swamiji also keep like a humor about it, or a lightness, let's call it lightness about it?
Yes, I would say that he would keep it light. Not to say that he didn't understand the seriousness of situations and that he didn't see them, but at the same time, because they straddle these two worlds, the world of Brahman and this transactional world that we inhabit, I think he could see them both, but at the same time, he could see that how people like us are affected by it. And then, as you said, that whether one ever saw him perturbed or affected. Once or twice, I saw him in certain situations, and he said he just needed to go to his room, and he would go, and for a few minutes, he'd be inside, maybe 10 minutes or something like that, and then he would be out again, looking the same radiant self, the same cheerful, light-hearted in the sense that taking the world lightly, not light-hearted, but taking it lightly. Yes.
Yes, please. Anyone else? Oh yes, Karuna, please.
Hari Om, Veena Mataji.
Hari Om.
Hari Om. Hari Om to everybody. Thank you so much for sharing this wonderful stories. I wanted to ask, Mataji mentioned twice when Swami Venkatesananda, when he requested something or asked something, you said then you just do. You don't even think of maybe I can't do it, or I can't, or yes. So my question was it a decision Mataji just made that I have to do when Swami Venkatesananda asked, or was it just a feeling of
For example, when I met him in Mauritius, at that time, I knew nothing about Shivananda or Shivananda ashram, or I didn't know how one behaves with an ochre-robed Swami, etc. This was long ago. So when we met, he, as I said, he just drew us into his aura, and he asked me to come and speak on Swami Shivananda in the ashram. I said, Swamiji, I've never heard of Shivananda. I don't know who he was. And what am I going to say? He said, no, we will send you some literature. We'll send it. So what do I get? Some few pamphlets here and there, from which I pick up little bits of information, and I go and speak, and I try to sort of say some very wise things about human ingenuity and about humans going to the moon and all kinds of stuff like that. And there is Swamiji sitting approvingly. So yes, there was hesitation, but there was also a knowing that you couldn't somehow say no to what he said. We just did it. Whenever he said something, we just did it. And also, to whatever extent, we also followed those in-passing statements that he made, which were really like Mahamantras. As we thought on, and as we lived on, we realized that those little small short statements, they came from a great depth, and they came at the right moment. They touched us at the right place. But for us to practice those, it takes a lifetime. We continue to do that. We still do it. I'm still doing it, and I can't say that I've succeeded. But yes, one didn't say no to Swamiji, and he said it so gently, and without any kind of coercion. No, it was just lovingly. So there was no question but there was, of course, hesitation was there.
Thank you, Mataji. The wonderful feeling of like a true devotion. Just it's like so natural. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karuna. Yes, Uma, you have a question.
Actually, Mataji, Mother Yogeshwari and Swami Parvati would like to know.
Oh, Hari Om, Hari Om. Mother, how are you?
Lovely to see you again.
It's very special.
Yes. Thank you very, very much for all your insight.
I think you could connect to the things that I was saying.
Thank you.
It's wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah. I enjoyed listening to your talk last time, because we can connect to the things that you say, and I think you could connect to what I was saying as well.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
I have a question, Mataji, for an undisciplined person like myself. How would one get into that kind of discipleship that you were just describing now? Where it is, do you have any advice on that?
Firstly, I don't think you're undisciplined at all. I don't look upon you as that. But I think this getting into a discipleship mode is an ongoing process, I think. In the case of course, there are some times, which may have been the case with Swami Venkatesananda also, that the moment he saw Shivananda, his discipleship just unfolded and something happened and it unfolded. But I think with most of us, it's an ongoing process as we dwell on the words of the Guru and as we dwell on the way he moved about, the way he dealt with situations in life, we more and more and more, we get into that mode. And so, as Swamiji said, that when the spirit of discipleship arises, then it is that we gain from the Mahapurusha. So I think the sadhana chatushtaya, which is given in our scriptures, the Viveka, Vairagya, etc., Shat Sampati, and Mukshutva, that itself is the preparing ground for discipleship until we have, so to say, cleansed our minds to some extent, that people like us keep trying to do all the time. He said too many things, which is give up the clutter. And this clutter is both inside and out. So the less we clutter, the more we declutter, I think the more transparent we become. And as this greater and greater transparency enables us to benefit from the presence of Mahapurushas, presence in the sense whether they are physically present or not, but we gain from the way they lived, what they taught, what they said. So I think basically it's an ongoing process, and we have to just keep our minds focused. And I think the process of focusing the mind also helps to declutter, because then we are sort of cutting through the dross and going to the goal, which is gaining from the words of the Guru. So I would say that, Swamiji. And you're not undisciplined.
Thank you, Mataji. Yes, Swami Sushila Mataji, please.
Yes, Veena, it's so wonderful to see you. It's just absolutely
so
enjoyable.
Nice to see you after so long. I don't know, it must be 40 years or something.
A long, long time, but it's so beautiful. I particularly loved your way of expressing Swamiji as a disciple and an embodiment of discipleship, because that was just something he conveyed to us by his own example. And it was done with such love, and your presentation was done with such love. And thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Sushila. I hope you'll come and visit now that things are opening up. Maybe not in the States so much, but here we are opening up. So come.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else like to ask something or say something? Was that Bhakti Priya? You are putting up your hand. Yes, okay, Bhakti Priya, please.
Mataji, I would like to say...
I lost you.
I would like to say thank you.
Thank you.
I would like to say thank you.
Yes, thank you very
for
much.
your sharing.
Yes.
Felt very, very touched by it. And I'm very grateful for sharing this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. It's wonderful that so many people have come together.
Yes, I also wanted to say thank you, Veena. It was so wonderful to see you in Rishikesh 2 years ago with Swamiji.
Yes.
And hope to see you again soon.
Yes, yes, lovely. I'm so glad to see you there now. after Rishikesh.
Yeah, near Cape Town.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mata. Yes, who else would like to say something or ask? Yes, Hamsa, please.
How are you?
I just want to say thank you very much, Veena. I remember coming to visit you in Rishikesh when I came with Swamiji and all my friends, all our devotees, and we came and had lunch with you. And it was one of the highlights of coming to India, because I'd never been to Rishikesh. I'd never been to India before. And meeting you there and seeing you today, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yeah, just wonderful talking about Swamiji Venkatesananda. Thank you.
Come and visit again.
I would love to. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
And next month
Yes.
we have Swami Ambikananda.
Yes, we're very fortunate that Swami Ambikananda Mataji has agreed to speak. So we're looking forward. So please keep the 29th of March free. It's a weekday, so it'll be in the 7 o'clock South Africa time. It's still to be confirmed, but that's more or less what we're probably looking at. Maybe a little earlier. Also, we have to see how. I don't quite know what the England time is. Maitri, you wanted to say something?
Hari Om, Veena Mataji.
Hari Om, how are you?
Very well, thank you. Thank you so much for sharing today.
Thank you.
Veena Mataji, can you share with us, who were the people that touched Swami Venkatesananda in his life? We know that he had associations with Krishnamurti and various faith leaders from various faiths.
Yes. I think he met a lot of people. The one by whom he was touched was, of course, his Guru, Swami Shivananda. But from that foundational background, from that basis, he met with so many people. I see a lot of his interactions with the Dalai Lama and people of various faiths, and of course Krishnamurti, as you said. I think because he was such an open person and he was so welcoming. This is the tradition of Shivananda, that this whole tradition is so open that there is no distinction between different sects or faiths, etc. So I think that is what made him so accessible, and he also could reach out to all different people. I think that's why, because even, for example, even at our ashram here, people who come here and we have the Christmas retreat, as many of us know, they tell me, and I have attended Christmas retreats here, and they say these are the best Christmas retreats that they have ever attended, because the spirit of if we might call it religion, or the spirit of the tradition is really brought out, rather than sticking to some given framework. And Swamiji didn't belong to any framework. He was always, he just was out of the box all the time. He was constantly, he just did things that unexpectedly, and that's what made it sort of so funny, and so brought out the ludicrousness of the situation so easily. So because he didn't act within a given framework, he just acted spontaneously, and I think, yes, he had interactions with a lot of people, or even scientists, etc. I can't name them just now offhand, but yes, it was this openness which enabled this to happen. And I'm sure those interactions would have opened up those other people also, enabling them to realize and recognize that when we go into the spirit of the tradition, then there are no boundaries. We go beyond boundaries. And that's what Swamiji was. He was not bounded within any framework. That's what I felt.
Thank you, thank you.
You know, Mataji, I also just wanted to ask something whether you have noticed, now you've translated Swamiji's Yoga Vasishtha or Supreme Yoga into Hindi. Have you found that there's a growing interest in India, specifically in the works?
Say it again, Swamiji, I lost you a bit.
Oh, I'm sorry. So I noticed, well, you had translated Swamiji's Yoga Vasishtha into Hindi. Have you noticed that there's sort of an interest, a growing interest in India for Swamiji's works?
Yes, I think so. Because there are people who come and ask me where they can get Swamiji's books, etc. So I think sometimes there are people who just by chance come upon a little clip of Swamiji or some work of Swamiji on the net, because these days technology has done wonders. And when there are things put up on the net, people tend to either deliberately or consciously, or sometimes just by chance, they come upon it and then they realize, oh, this is somebody that we would like to know about, and they wish to know more about Swamiji. Yes, I would say so. I think technology also has a role to play in that. So it's good that we are using it the way you're using it now.
And then how do you do a translation of this type?
How? It was actually my own sadhana. I was trying to understand it. They say that when you don't understand something, just sit down and try and write. And that's what I tried to do. And I did it slowly. It took time. But then I found that it could be published. So it got published as well. Actually, I was only just writing it in Hindi, trying to understand. And I have to say that it was Priya who goaded me, and she said, find a publisher. I said, well, when I finish, then I will. She said, no, you find a publisher now. So I started looking, and somebody was there. And so, yes, I think sometimes somebody comes in and becomes like my favorite word, catalyst. And so they become catalytic in the process.
Mm-hmm. Wow,
it's amazing. It was my sadhana.
Mm-hmm. So I think we're coming towards the end. If there's any more questions or so, we can take one or two more. Otherwise, then we can close with a prayer. Yes, Uma.
Rukmini hasn't said a word unlike her. Rukmini, what's happened to Rukmini? She hasn't spoken.
Oh, Rukmini.
Rukmini's listening.
Rukmini is just soaking it all up.
Yes, she said.
Rukmini has nothing to say. I'm just an open vessel receiving it all. It's such a blessing.
Wonderful. Yes, wonderful. Great. Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, then let us close tonight's session. So, Veena Mataji, thank you so much for being available and to share yourself with us and your experiences in essence with Swami Venkatesananda. By sharing these, you have shared some of Swami Venkatesananda with us. And it is for us, as the new generation, as I call us, a great inspiration. Swami Venkatesh himself, I read in some of his works that he was quite keen on people reading biographies of saints, little maybe he thought that we would be also wanting to study his life and know more about him and his devotees and disciples. So thank you so much, and thank you to everyone for participating, all the disciples of Swami Venkatesananda and all of our friends of the ashram. So thank you very much, and we look forward to another satsang on the 29th of March, details to follow. But as you have heard, we're very blessed and thank Swami Ambikananda Mataji that she'll be sharing with us. Maybe you can just raise your hand so that everybody can see.
And I have to introduce Robert Swamiji. Robert is the keep-in here. He's the one who's enabled all this. Because
oh yes, thank you very much, Robert, for helping Mataji. She's not used to the Zoom.
Without him, I couldn't have been swimming in this ocean of Zoom and technology and whatnot.
Yeah, thank you so much. So we're very grateful. Thank you. So let us conclude then with the closing prayer. Om Asatoma Satkamaya Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Mritam Gamaya Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamrachate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamiva Vashishyate Om Shanti 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 Om Tatsa Pramarpanamastu Shri Shivananda Bhavana Ki Jai, Shri Swami Venkatesananda Maharaj Ki Jai. God bless everyone. Thank you. Om Om.